Okay, I'm gonna go have some sausage.
Ooh, sausage. What kind of sausage?
I think it's a bratwurst.
Are you gonna have mustard with it?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
maybe multiple kinds. Yeah, we don't fuck around. So, hey, good evening. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, Jay. Yeah.
How was your day? What happened?
Yeah, today was mostly uneventful. Yesterday, though, was was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. Yeah,
Mm.
that was the announcement day for my transition at work.
Did it happen over email or what? Does everybody who works for the company all work in the same place?
Well, so the team I'm on, we're all in sort of one large room with our desks sort of around the perimeter of it.
Okay.
That's, I guess, the development team, and then there's also another group that's also on the same floor, on the 15th floor where I work, but on the other side of the floor. And then there's some on the 6th floor, and there's some people also in a Miami office.
Oh, Miami. Interesting. Okay.
Yes, Miami. Yeah. So, so wait, what was your question again?
Well, let's start here. How
Okay.
often would you interact with the people who weren't on your team?
At least as far as the 15th floor, it so happens that the bathrooms are sort of in the middle area near the elevators. So it wouldn't be uncommon for me to see people there going to and fro or going to and from lunch and what have you.
Okay. Did you talk to
Uh,
them? Did you make small talk? Hey, how about that local sports weather?
well,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Yeah. And then every month we also have a birthday celebration where
Oh,
they pick up a shitty sheet cake from
yeah.
Albertsons, and everyone whose birthdays are in that month, the whole company meets in the conference room roughly, all the people in the Dallas office,
Hmm.
and then we have cake, and the big boss announces, "Oh, Susan is having her birthday on the
Uh-huh.
14th, and Kevin is having his birthday on the 2nd, and let's all sing happy birthday to these people."
The people from Miami are left to fend for themselves.
Well, as I understand it, I think the Miami is the sort of where a lot of salespeople are, so they sort of do their own thing anyway.
Okay.
I think it's a fairly small office, maybe 15 people, something like that.
All right. So there aren't real strangers then in your company. People that you've heard of but have never seen,
Yeah,
except for maybe the Miami people.
right,
Okay.
right, yeah, yeah.
So how did the announcement take place?
The whole initiative, as far as my transition, was with myself and the HR guy and my manager. And so essentially, the announcement bits were roughly split up between the HR guy and my manager.
Hmm.
With my manager take care of the 15th floor and the HR guy taking care of the 6th floor.
Okay.
And doing so in just kind of clumps or groups of people at a time.
So it wasn't like the birthday meeting at all then.
No, even though I would have been okay with it, actually.
Okay.
Just get it all out
Everybody
there.
turns their head to stare at you at the exact same time, except for people who maybe have better reflexes.
And even then, I mean, some companies do it that way in sort of a
Hmm.
large group thing. And then this is just sort of a hypothetical other company thing, but you could either have the trans person present or not present. And uh, either way sort of can work in its own way that if the trans person is present, then it shows that management's behind this person and so on as well, that
Mm.
if there are any questions that come up, that person maybe will answer them. At the same time, the argument to be made maybe to not have the trans person present, in the sense that if people have questions but maybe they're too embarrassed to ask them or whatever, then they could ask them of management and so on, and without being concerned about being embarrassing or whatever.
And it sounds like you weren't present for each of the clumps then.
No, no, I was present for when my manager did the announcement to our group.
Okay. And you had already talked to everybody in your group.
Yes, with an asterisk,
All right.
which is to say that there are 12 people on our team, and I had come out to all of them individually. However, it so happens that we have some offshore developers in the Philippines,
Hmm.
and one of their guys was in town, well, for like a month and a half. starting Monday.
Hmm.
At any rate, so this developer fellow, I had not come out to him. So yeah, but as far as the full-time people that are always there, yeah, I'd come out to those guys.
The people that you had already come out to, though, were unaware that you'd be having a formal transition date, or did you talk about that with them in the past in your solo conversations?
Yeah, when I came out to them, I mentioned about, well, with the exception of my manager, for each person I say, and these persons that I haven't come out to yet, and that eventually I would transition at work.
Okay.
So I didn't really give it a timetable, but sort of that it would be kind of heading in that direction.
So from your perspective, how did those announcements go?
Well, I was only present at the one for my group.
I thought maybe you might have heard something after the fact.
Not really.
Okay.
No, it would have been nice if my boss would have
Yeah.
said something, but whatever.
I imagine if there was a crisis of some kind, you would have heard about it.
Yeah.
So I guess
Yeah.
there wasn't.
No, it was no crisis. I wouldn't put it that way. I mean, I can tell you about how the announcement went for my group, if you'd like.
Sure. I think that I heard you saying the manager flubbed a few pronouns here and there.
That would be putting it kindly.
Oh.
More specifically, he bludgeoned every single pronoun when referencing me.
Wow. I thought it was just some.
No, I may have equivocated slightly in my tweet so as just to be more friendly about it, but no,
Okay.
he completely destroyed all of my pronouns.
Well, I shake my fist in the past at his direction.
As do I. And in fact, it was embarrassing when he would do that. Because he would talk, the way he phrased it was, so as you know, birth name has been living as a woman outside of work. I thought it was an especially odd phrasing given that someone could quite easily conflate what the boss was describing with me being someone who cross-dresses. Which there's nothing wrong with, but that's not who I am.
Right. It's the same thing that you thought your parents might be thinking.
Right. Right. So it's not that it's not a hobby of mine, or it's not a, this is just me. And
What did he say after that?
well, so he said, as you all know, blah, blah, blah. And me knowing what the meeting was about, I said, well, actually, not everyone knows.
Okay.
Because, of course, this contractor from the Philippines.
Right.
He didn't know. And then so he kind of motions out with one hand and says, oh, right. Yeah, you don't know what's going on. And why would you single out the guy saying, oh, yeah, you're out of the loop. Make him feel like a rube. I mean, come
That's
on.
too bad.
I mean, he could have just said, oh, I'm sorry. And just gone on from there. But to point out the guy and say like, oh, you don't know anything. But everyone else does. You're out of the loop, buddy. Anyway, then he goes on to say about how, oh, birth name has been living as a woman outside of work.
Mm.
And as of Monday, he would like to go by Ashley. And keep in mind that as of then, you would then use the appropriate pronouns as well, or something.
Okay.
There were more sentences to it than just that. There's
Right.
probably half a dozen instances of pronouns in there, but to me, it was just, it felt like if supposing we had a new African American employee on the team and he was giving introductions, if supposing he had used the phrase, quote, Negro each time instead of whatever else, it was that kind of thing to me. Or if he had someone who had a learning disability and he used the R word every time when talking about someone.
Sure. Yeah.
It was like, it was, and I could see that, I mean, I was gritting my teeth because it was kind of painful, and I was sort of looking at the floor because it was embarrassing for me.
Mm.
Even though he was, well, I'll get to that part later, but I could see my other coworkers cringing at each instance of the wrong pronouns. Because with my other coworkers, I had come out to them individually and given them a greater background and so on.
Yeah.
And so they knew who I am, and they knew
But
my
your
background.
manager had the big stack of HRC documents that, in theory, he's read through.
Well, so that's the thing, is that after the meeting, I went to talk with him privately, and I said, because I knew that he still had to talk to the other side, do other small group announcements.
Oh, yeah.
I said, even just water under the bridge as far as our group, it'd be really nice if you could just use female pronouns in the context of the announcement.
Yeah.
If only so that people could sort of get used to it and, okay, here's what's expected of us.
Hmm.
And he said, oh, no, but I've talked with the HR guy. We're very careful about this. We know that it's only happening as of Monday. So until then, when talking about the present, we didn't want to do that. And I was like,
Oh, boy.
no, dipshit, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Because my gender identity is not changing on Monday.
It reminds me of a few episodes ago when I was annoyingly confused that I didn't notice until I was editing it, because you had told 9 or 10 people on your team you'd come out to them, and so I thought that you were mostly out at work.
Oh, this part.
Yeah, and it made me cringe just while editing it, because I'm like, you don't get it yet. You don't get it yet. I'm yelling at myself in the past, because I didn't know that there was going to be like a formal announcement, and
Oh, yes.
you would have the ability to dress the way that you'd feel more comfortable and going to a different restroom and whatnot.
Right. Yes.
So I thought it was just a matter of telling individual people, and then once the secret was entirely out, you'd be more comfortable. But this guy had a conversation with an HR guy and lots of lawyers, and they weren't all including you, so they came to conclusions that are upsetting you.
I know he doesn't mean it maliciously, but he just does not seem to have internalized.
Yeah. It seems to me that when you told him, by the way, I wanted to let you know that I'm transgender, you had said something like, by the way, I'm thinking of being transgender.
Well, even on the off chance that he understood it that way, in that first meeting between my manager, the HR guy, and myself, when we were discussing sort of the preliminary details, one of the things the HR guy brought up was what terminology I preferred, which I thought was actually quite a considerate thing to ask me about, since he had read through the HRC document, and there were things like transgender and transsexual and so on. And so I conveyed to him about for transgender. And then I went on to talk about sort of a quick referencing about how cross-dressing is separate from
Right.
drag and so on. So they should have been in the loop. And more specifically, I asked them that I would prefer the term transgender. Because that would have really clarified things. It's not just, oh, so-and-so has been living as a woman. That's...
Right.
No. If my manager had been extremely progressive, I would not have had qualms were he to have said, so-and-so is a woman, and will have a gender presentation as such on Monday. That would have been acceptable to me. But it's not like a Halloween costume. I'm not just putting this on my own time.
Right. You're not pretending.
Yeah. So the reason that I asked my boss when I talked to him privately after our little announcement thing as far as the pronouns and so on is because I really wanted the other people in the company to understand who I am.
Yeah.
To be able to see through the marbles in his mouth of his explanation.
And he said, no, I'm not going to do that until Monday.
Yeah. He's like, oh, that's when it's official, and that's when... Like,
It's really weird. Do you think that he thinks of work as the cornerstone of one's life?
My manager values an honest day's work, but at the end of the day, he likes spending time with his son and everything else. So,
because I think of what you do to earn an income as an aspect of your life, and rests on top of everything else that you are. But I've known people who feel the other way, like what you do for a living is informing your personality and dictates other things that you get to do throughout your whole life. So I didn't know if maybe that's the sort of mindset he had. And so he might think, not until you're out at work are you going to feel out in the rest of your life.
No, I think he just doesn't get it that I'm transgender and that that aspect of me was likely formed 34 years ago and
Yeah, I don't
not
think he gets
a
that.
month ago.
When it comes to pronouns and whatnot, as
Hmm,
people are retraining themselves to
right.
use different ones for you,
Hmm.
how often would you allow them to make a mistake before you start gently correcting them, and
Right.
maybe after that start not so gently correcting them?
So part of it depends on some of the context, which is to say that some of my friends are enormous allies and they set a higher standard for themselves than I set for them, as it were. So,
Okay.
so some of my friends, when they make a mistake, they insist that I correct them immediately.
And okay. Does that mean that sometimes they don't notice themselves doing it?
They would almost always notice it, but as sort of a,
They want an external influence anyway.
yes, someone
Okay.
that on the off chance they don't notice it, that they want to be pointed out so that they can be on point. Or
Okay. That's
yeah.
nice.
For most people, though, that's not the default tact that I
Hmm.
use, simply because I'm inferring that people would find that abrasive. So what I typically do is, assuming that this is someone that I've come out to and have expressed my preferences around pronouns, I would let the first one go by, just in the sense that I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that if they come to their own realization, maybe even 30 seconds later or a minute
Hmm.
later, oh, that's right, I used the wrong pronouns, I'll get it right the next time.
Okay.
I don't want to be too hard on them or what have you.
Hmm.
Because for a lot of people, they're trying really hard with the name and everything, and uh, they're already doing a lot for me.
Now, when you say the first time, do you mean the first conversation in which it happens one or more times, or do you count each instance as
The
an
first,
instance?
each instance, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody managed to somehow do that 3 times in one sentence,
Yeah, though that would be a very wonky sentence.
it sure would.
Yeah. And then I may also allow one other time.
Okay.
But after that, that's sort of the grace period that I offer that. Because really, part of my goal is that if people are going to realize it on their own, even if it's not an immediate realization, then I want people to be able to go through that process because I don't want them to feel that I'm being aggressive about it.
Hmm.
But so then if there's a third time, yeah, I would gently say something. But having said that, um, if after I've offered that initial correction, then it doesn't reset back to zero or what have you.
Right. Okay.
From then on, if someone makes a mistake, then I would correct them probably right away.
Do you go by the same flowchart or do loop, as it were, when it comes to your name? Or does that require a different tactic from you?
No, for that one, I would generally correct people quite quickly. Just since I found that people are able to adjust more easily to my name because that's something where, oh, there's a birth name slot in someone's brain, and instead you put in Ashley, shriek, and then you use this word instead of this word.
I have to assume there's some kind of muscle memory, though, there.
There is, but at the same time, it's an easier type of muscle memory than pronouns, just since
Hmm.
you can't universally swap out he for she because some people will get one and some people
I
get the
see.
other. So you can't just blanket replace one with the other.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's sort of some on the fly thinking about, okay, which one applies to which people.
After you came out to me, I had trained myself just to use your new first name all the time instead
Mm-hmm.
of pronouns to make sure that I wouldn't screw it up.
Okay,
And
yeah.
sometimes I still do have to think deliberately about it when I'm talking to my wife or whatever.
About
But
my first name or the pronouns?
the pronouns.
Okay.
Your first name comes naturally to me now.
Oh
But
yay!
I'm trying to make my sentences sound more normal, so I'm trying to insert more pronouns where I used to just always use your new first name.
Oh yay! That makes me really happy, Jay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because it's no, I mean it really shows that that's a very warm sign of support, and I really appreciate that.
So that is the tactic you've been using with your friends. Now, do you
Right,
imagine using the same thing at work when it comes to correcting people?
right. So at work, if it's someone who's at my same level, I would say then I would generally offer those same types of things,
Okay.
same approach. If it's someone who is higher than me, I would probably be a little bit more gentle about it.
Hmm.
Although I might be playful.
Can you give me an example of that?
Well, so the big cheese in the company likes to go around and check on statuses for people. And he'll go from one person to the next and interrupt them each individually for about 2 to 3 minutes.
Making his rounds
Right. And he'll
and
say,
decreasing productivity by about 20 minutes.
exactly. Well, at
Mm-hmm.
least 20 minutes
At
since
least.
you have to get back into what you're doing and everything else. Anyhow, so let's say hypothetically the big cheese's name is Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
So if Jeff walks up to me on Monday and says, "So, birth name, what have you been working on?" I'll say, "Not too much, Kevin. Maybe."
Right.
Just to kind of, and then he'll say, "Wait, oh, okay." Instead of being like, "Oh, you're wrong." You know,
Okay. I can see how that would work.
yeah.
You got a question in your email from somebody that you've known for a long time, and they asked something that I had been asking myself, but forgot to bring up with you. When we're talking about interactions we've had with you in the past before you came out to yourself, certainly before you came out to us, should we just call you Ashley? Because I don't know, maybe it's a story that you were doing something particularly manly.
I'm smiling just in the sense that I'm not a macho girl, as it were,
Uh-huh.
or I don't, but I suppose I give you the benefit of the doubt. It's entirely plausible I've done manly things in the past. So I mean that's a reasonable question, and it's one that there's not necessarily a clear-cut approach as far as how various trans people handle it. There's actually a great reference on GLAAD, the GLAAD,
Mm-hmm.
as far as terminology around transgender persons and just dealing with some of the common ones. But among them, there's also a section on here are things to avoid. But one of them was that they make the point that it can at times become awkward to talk about someone in the past and so on and trying to keep track of pronouns and
Yeah.
everything else. And so the way I look at it is, well, I should back up a bit. Have I talked on the show about some of the science around what makes people transgender or some of the theories on that?
Not really.
Okay, so scientists aren't entirely sure what makes someone trans versus other people not trans. But one thing that they do know as far as the development of fetuses is that by default, a fetus is on a path toward becoming a girl.
I think I knew that.
And about 8 weeks into the pregnancy, for those fetuses that have an XY chromosome, there is a hormone wash, which then sets the body's path toward becoming a baby boy. And what scientists theorize is that this hormone wash, it may be incomplete or interrupted in some cases, the exact reasons of which are not entirely clear, but in that case that it could be that this person is born in which their body is one gender and their brain is physically and biologically another.
Wow.
And knowing my own experiences, I believe that to be true.
Okay.
Which may shed some light on some of what I've talked about on the show as far as, for example, my gender dysphoria.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can imagine that my brain is expecting to live in the body of a girl, and that is not what's matching up.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be disconcerting and so on. Along those lines, the way in which I view being trans is as a birth defect. Not unlike if I had a club foot or a congenital heart defect, for example.
Right.
And further, I think of it in some ways similar to the congenital heart defect in the sense that sometimes they may go undiscovered for years, and then at a later checkup or upon closer examination, the doctor will say, oh, so-and-so, you have this heart defect.
Okay.
And in that respect, it's not something that someone just acquired that heart defect. They've always had it, even though they only figured it out recently.
Or in your case, age 13 or 14.
Right.
Was when you started to suspect.
Right. And so for that hypothetical person who has that congenital heart defect but only learned about it and realized it later in life, if that person was then talking about his or her childhood, they wouldn't necessarily exclude the fact that they had this heart defect because they've always had it, even if they didn't know about it.
Okay.
And so in that respect, the way I think of myself is that even if I had only realized I was trans at a non-zero age, it's something that I've always been. And so what I would feel most comfortable with is if people would use female pronouns for me when talking about me in the past.
And your birth name? Or your chosen name instead of your birth name?
Yes, I would generally prefer my chosen name, although if talking amongst the company of persons that had known me from prior years, I wouldn't necessarily have qualms if they were to say when Ashley was known as such and such or what have you.
Yeah, okay.
At the same time, of course, if say my friend Keith was talking with other developers at a conference who had known me otherwise, then I would not want him to refer to my birth name because that would out me.
Okay.
And what I should also say in this regard is that I would like to think that after years of HRT and perhaps one surgery or another, that I would be able to come to a point where I would be able to pass most, if not all, of the time.
Right.
And so I would think it likely that I'll come to meet developers or coworkers or friends who perhaps may only know me as Ashley. And so in that respect, if someone were to tell a story about me from several years ago, it would out me if that person were to use the pronouns of the opposite gender.
Okay. That makes total sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of my view on it. And some trans people kind of have slightly different variations, but that's kind of what makes sense for me.
Can I ask you about... they're not called honorifics. What are those things called? It's not really a pet name because that's somebody you have a relationship with, but if somebody, I don't know, let's say a waiter or a waitress, probably a waitress would do it more often, would like be calling you darlin or sweetie.
Right.
You comfortable with either of those?
I don't know yet. Well,
when you came out to me, I subconsciously, I think, decided that it was part of my job because I know how slowly it was going to go for you to use some of those when talking to you, because I tend to do that with my female friends. And you're smiling, so I guess you didn't mind it.
No.
But there's a spectrum.
Right.
At which point, at some point, it becomes sexist.
Or condescending, depending.
Right. And I didn't know if you had any experience or thoughts with any of that, either during your life in drag or in your life as a woman. So let me just test a few on you, darlin. Well,
so the tricky part is coming from you, Jay. I know that they're meant with complete affection, and so you could almost call me, I don't know, a sack of yogurt or something, and I would find that endearing. Okay. But all right, so when you give me these kind of shooting from the hip words, are these coming from Jay or are these coming from a hypothetical person?
I'm trying to think of something kind of neutral.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, at one point, at a certain point, it becomes impossible because there's nobody who would call you sweet tits without being a jerk, right? Only a jerk would use that phrase.
You could call me sweet tits, Jay. Maybe only you, but you can call
Wow.
me Sweet Tits.
Nice. All right. So like, I was thinking something like darlin or sweetie or cupcake or honey bear or. But I'm trying to think of the ones that don't show up in romantic relationships so much, the ones that you might actually hear in an office, like
Right.
cutie.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Cutie would be bad. Is that condescending?
That would be a term compliment, or that would be addressing me based on my attractiveness.
Possibly. There are parts of cuteness that are personality based.
If one of your coworkers said, so how are those wireframes coming along, you hunky guy? I mean, that would be weird, right?
It would be weird unless we had a relationship based on being funny. Like if I knew that he or she was making a
Right.
joke.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And I feel the same way about cutie.
Okay. That's cool. I might think of some more in the future and just
Yeah.
sprinkle them in and see how you
Did
react.
you see my tweet from the other day about the Container Store?
No. What happened at the Container Store?
It was, may I help you, dear?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to take that because I didn't know, well, I had not been addressed as dear before, and I wasn't necessarily against it, but at the same time, is that something that women often find themselves to be addressed
There's
as?
at least a 2-to-1 chance that she saw you as a woman, yeah. I've been called dear in retail circumstances, but it's rare.
Okay.
More often you get that from aunts and grandmas.
Right.
Okay, well, do you mind teaching me something ladylike?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So, I've got a couple jobbies.
Oh, no, not jobbies.
So, these are two nail jobbies. One.
Nails? What more could I possibly learn about nails?
Yes.
Or is it just maybe a color that you like?
No, not per se.
All right.
So if you're painting your toes, naturally you want to keep your toes separated so that they don't jump on top of each other and ruin your polish.
Okay.
So you may have seen like these little jobbies.
No, I've just seen cotton balls.
Okay.
Are those all the same size? Are there only 4 of them? I guess you don't really technically need 4.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice way of consolidating materials.
Yes. So
Conserving.
as you might guess, you stick the toe in here and toe in here, and then you go, bloop, and there, Bob's your uncle. And it does work. It keeps your toes separated. And these are quite common at nail salons because they're very effective. The one downside, however, is that if you're painting your own toes, and perhaps you're doing your toes and nails or whatever, chances are you're going to finish painting your toes, and maybe you want to get a glass of water, or maybe you want to check your phone or something.
Yeah.
And so you have to walk around a little bit. And that's not going to necessarily ruin your toes. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing, though, is that if you imagine your foot being in this thing, it's kind of hard to walk when you've got these jobbies stuck between your toes.
Right.
So that's kind of the one disadvantage to this thing, even though, I mean, for goodness sakes, it's probably $2.99 or something.
Mm-hmm.
There's little harm in picking one up if someone had wanted to try it.
Is that like a rubbery thing? Or is it more like foam? I can't tell.
It's kind of like a squishy foam thing. Sort of like the cozy thing around a drink, maybe?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But you also have little individual ones. It's like little baby toe separators. And by the way, these are called toe separators.
Okay.
So these ones are just individual jobbies, which you might think, oh, pish posh, that's so much more work. You could just have the whole thing and do it in a batch. But the advantage of these little guys is you can put these in between your toes, just the ones that are kind of wonkified and do this thing, or, one of these. And so you just put it between these two toes, and you don't need it on the other toes.
And it's easier to walk?
It's easier to walk, and just while you're painting them, it's generally more comfortable.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So there's certainly little penalty to trying both if you want to, because they're both so cheap. But if you just simply have neither of them and want to pick something up, I would probably go for just the individual ones. So, toe separators. Probably old news to most people, but if you're just getting into...
I hadn't seen them before. My imagination, they were all cotton balls.
cotton balls can become compressed, and then your toes start out being sort of a certain distance, and then they get closer and closer.
Yeah.
But also with these guys, you can see they sort of have the little trough or the hook thing for your toe.
Horseshoe shape, yeah.
So it's not going to fall off your toe.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense as well, you can walk around and not have to worry about the cotton balls falling out, because these things will just stay in there until you just pull them out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Neat.
Quite handy, actually. So then the other thing, so I got these two polishes, which they look like different colors, and they are different colors. But
okay,
I'm not just messing
with
with
switch
it.
on me.
But they're actually from China Glaze, and they're called Crackle. Have you heard of these?
No, I've heard of China Glaze.
Okay, that's right, because of Fortune Teller, episode 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was my first polish I put on. The one with those black with the orange glitter.
Oh, yeah.
Which still has a special place in my heart.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, with these Crackle polishes, this is not your main color that you're putting on.
What?
Your head may have just exploded a little bit, but anyway. So essentially, say you put on a normal nail polish. Like this one is the one that I have on now. And do you want to guess the name of this color, by the way?
I actually was going to ask you if you were still wearing teal the cows come home, but it looks a little darker.
Yes, this is a little bit darker.
I still say it's some shade of azure, though.
It could be. And this, and I will give them credit that the name does not have any color-related puns in it, which is a plus. But nonetheless,
it's disappointing.
Well, it can be. But okay? So the name of this color is from OPI, and it's called Yodel Me on My Cell.
What the fuck does that mean?
I know.
Yodel.
Yodel.
And it's spelled normally?
Yodel.
And how is cell spelled?
Cell.
Oh, okay. So like phone.
Yeah.
Call me on my cell phone.
Right, but why would they call... Well, I mean...
I was imagining somebody in prison at first.
Oh, goodness.
Not a lot of entertainment options in prison. Maybe somebody would
yodel. Not a lot of
yodel.
yodeling options either in prison. Anyway, so let's suppose you had a base color of this guy. Then, once this dries, then you can put this Crackle on top. And what it will do is it will dry and then naturally form cracks in it, like shattered glass effect. So suppose you had this one as the base, the blue, and then you had this gray one as your Crackle. So what you would have is you'd have sort of the gray with cracks in it showing through the blue.
Is the gray one sort of transparent, or does it sort of evaporate in an interesting way? How does the blue show through?
If you suppose you had a glass plate, just a dinner plate.
Okay.
And you dropped it from, say, a foot onto your tile kitchen floor, it would shatter. And as it did so, the pieces of the plate would no longer line up perfectly, and you'd have little gaps in between.
Sure. It would sort of look like the Emperor's window on the Death Star, but the nail polish is not solid, it's a liquid, so how do you get that to shatter?
Essentially, as it dries, I believe it's, I don't know, chemically unstable or something, but essentially, as it dries, it will, or maybe, I don't know, oleophobic or something, but it will dry and it will crackle on your nail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're wide enough cracks so you can see the blue underneath it, or whatever color is underneath.
Right.
Does it also double as a top coat?
No, you would...
Damn it. I'm trying to save you some time here.
Well, so that's sort of the thing with these is that, as you are aware, Jay, you would have the base coat, the 2 coats of color, and then the top coat normally. Though with this type of arrangement, you would have the base coat, the 2 coats of color, then the Crackle, and then the top coat. So not only does it not save you time, it actually takes extra time because you have the extra coat in there.
You'd have to watch one of the Lord of the Rings movies while you were painting your nails.
To elaborate a bit, though, so Crackle is the brand name, as it were, of this effect from China Glaze. But then there's also, OPI has a similar setup, and theirs is called shatter.
Oh,
And
okay.
so on camera, these may look the same, but this one's sort of more of a silvery, glittery, and this one's kind of
All right.
more of a matte gray type thing. And indeed, there's not just these colors. There's also black shatter. There's pink crackle.
There better be.
Yeah, but so you can imagine you could have, say, a black base coat, and then you could put pink crackle on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could have these neat cracks showing through the black, but with the pink on top. You can do all.
So what do people say to each other? Do they say, "Are you going to crackle your nails?" Like, "I'm going to scrunchie my hair."
No, I mean, as it would happen, of the two, Shatter is probably the more well-known
Oh, really? Okay.
one from OPI. So you might say, are you going to use Shatter on your nails? Or
Not every nail polish company is doing this yet.
no, not yet.
Revlon doesn't have a marbling effect.
No, yeah.
One of them's going to use marble.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's believable, yeah.
That sounds like fun.
It is fun. So the little toe separators are pretty simple, but the crackle things, those are really recent-ish. So,
Awesome.
yeah, good stuff.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jay.
I still have questions, so I guess I'm going to call you again later and we'll put out another show.
How about that? That sounds good with
idea.
me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, sweet tits.
Good night, sugar lumps.